Vladimir Putin, when he launched the full-scale invasion in February 2022, this was to be his legacy. This is a man in his 70s. This is a man who has ruled Russia for 25 years. But he cannot say that Russia is a power to match the United States or China or the European Union. He can't say it's an economic power on that scale. He can't say that he has regained the glory of the Soviet Empire. He can't say that he's had this overwhelming success. I mean, okay, fine. He's got Abkhazia, South Ossetia, but is that your legacy? So what does he do in 2022? His legacy is going to be to make Ukraine part of Greater Russia. That's the way I read it. If you go back and read the July 2021 long essay that he wrote to set this up, that's how I read that. Now, if this is to be your legacy, you can't give up. You can't give up and take just a part of Ukraine and say, oh, well, my legacy is that I got, Donetsk and Luhansk and I've got Mariupol, but there's still Kyiv that still stands. There's Odessa that still stands. There's Lviv that still stands. And there's a Ukraine which is probably going to be part of the European Union and at least will be associated with NATO, even if it's not a NATO member. So you have to keep going. You have to keep attacking. Now you might say, well, wait. People would tell Putin, they say, well, look, you just can't achieve this. You just can't. You can't. It's not gonna. We're not going to succeed. We're not going to take all of Ukraine. Let's just take what we have. The number of people who can say that to Ukraine has been sharply reduced. Think about this. That some of his key military commanders, for example, General Surovikin, they're gone. They've been gone for a couple of years now. Who has he got around him? He's got people like General Gerasimov, who, as you know, appeared, 2 weeks ago with this magic map that showed supposedly all of these areas that Russia had taken. And it was Russian military bloggers and observers said, that's ridiculous. We know that we haven't taken that territory. So you got Gerasimov saying, we're winning. You've got Dmitry Medvedev, who, when he is sober, is saying, I'm sure, yes, great job, Vladimir, because that's what Medvedev has to do to keep his position. He can't say, Mr. Kozak, one of the few Kremlin officials who came out and said, look, we're not going to win this. Where is he now? Sacked. I was given some position, I think in Tartarstan or somewhere, way far away from the Kremlin. There are no longer the advisors around Putin who are going to tell him the reality of what's happening. And, his longest serving advisor, possibly, Mr. Lavrov, what's he doing? He's in New York this week trying to tell all these other delegations, you must side with us. We're wonderful. We're part of the great BRICS geopolitical order. Yeah. And so Putin and Lavrov count on the disinformation, the misinformation, the propaganda to change reality. They will try to change reality by splitting countries, especially European countries, away from Ukraine. I think they have less chance of success now. I have to say, I have my frustrations with European countries. I have my frustrations with the European Union. But I think by and large, they've done well here. And I think even if Donald Trump is unpredictable and chaotic, I don't think the Kremlin succeeds in isolating Ukraine. Instead, I think Russia is isolating itself.
You just mentioned about Dmitry Kozak. According to the Washington Post, he was the only high-rank Kremlin official who opposed Russia's war against Ukraine. It's so surprisingly that he didn't fall from the window and just was sacked by Vladimir Putin. Could this mean that Putin decides to continue his war effort? Because according to Washington Post, Dmitry Kozak was trying to persuade Vladimir Putin to settle this war.
I think that's exactly how I read from the signal. Dmitry Kozak was, why he survived, we could speculate on that. I think actually Putin does have some personal loyalties, despite the fact that he's a very, very nasty man. And I think there's enough of a personal bond with Dmitry Kozak that it was like he could tolerate listening to him. And then when it came to the point where he can't, he just disappears into the Russian bureaucracy rather than disappearing him outside a window 5 stories up. But that said, it's like, okay, who's there left then to say to Putin, this is what you face? I think the officials, it's interesting. I think if you really think about the officials who are actually saying we've got issues here, you've got the head of the central bank who has actually said, look, we've got really serious economic issues here. We've got a real tug of war here between interest rates and inflation. That's been going on. You then have the finance minister who is saying, look, if we don't do something, we're going to be in recession. Not that we might not be in recession, we're going to be in recession. You've got the head of Mr. Graf, the head of one of Russia's largest banks, saying the same thing, that recession's on the way. And I think those are the people that can sort of, without directly confronting Putin, you're not going to win it. They can say, look, we've got a difficult situation here. And the interesting thing about this is, who's the defense minister? It's Mr. Belousov, who is an economist. Now, I have not heard much from him lately, so I'm going to benefit from your viewers out there. But if the defense minister comes out wearing his economist hat and says, we've got problems with maintaining this war at this level, that's when the pressure grows on Putin. But at this point, the public projection of the Kremlin still is, we've got the gasoline shortages, we've got economic issues, but we can deal with these. We can still deal with these and maintain the special military operation. So I think we go into the winter. We go into the winter when I think it's more difficult for offensives to advance. And we say, how much serious does the damage become in the Russian economy? How much more damage can the Ukrainian attacks inflict? And does that start to open up just the possibility that Putin realizes he's not going to win?
You just mentioned about the next steps of Ukraine. It's really interesting opinion. If Ukraine continues this attacks on Russia's oil refining capacity, for how long can Vladimir Putin sustain this? If Ukraine damages not 20% of Russia's oil refining capacity, but 30-40% of that, what could this mean for Vladimir Putin's war machine if Ukraine continues to conduct and would be able to conduct such successful drone strikes directly on this largest oil refineries?
I think I would take that in 2 parts. I think the part which is inside Russia is, and this is my reading, and it's my reading from history and so on, and that is that Russian culture, indeed Soviet culture before that, a lot of it is bound around the idea of leaders saying, you have to sacrifice. You have to sacrifice for the good of the motherland. You have to sacrifice for the good of, in this case, the special military operation. And you have to realize also that some Russian people have economically benefited from this. I mean, people who had very little money, but who could go into the military, they risk their lives, but if they survive, they see more money than they have ever seen. So I think that idea of continuing the sacrifice while some people still benefiting from the military machine, it means that everything doesn't fall apart inside Russia, right? But the second part of it is inside Ukraine. I think what it means is that the Russian capacity to try to win is more and more constrained. And so I think Putin is in the position where he stays in power, and the Russian people still accept his authoritarian rule. But he has to consider the idea, first of all, of selling to himself that he accepts only part of Ukraine. And I do, with respect to your viewers and the great viewers, I do think in the short term, you're not going to militarily remove Russia from the east and parts of the south, as well as Crimea. I think Putin may think, well, maybe I just accept what I have now. And I think there may be those around Putin who reappear. We talked about Mr. Kozak, who say, look, let's just accept what we have right now. I think that's what happens. That's what opens up if the Ukrainian attacks continue to hit the economy via the oil refineries, if they continue to hit the military via the oil refineries and the gas pipelines, for example. Can Ukraine go farther? Can it actually, as it cause further economic damage, fundamental damage to the Russian economy? I think that's a question that hinges not only on the drones, it hinges on how much missile capacity they have and how much they're allowed to use.
Also, you just mentioned about Putin's war. CNN recently reported that this war is Putin's existential war. And this analysis suggests that after it ends, Putin likely loses power or faces impossible job of explaining and healing that even his autocracy will struggle with, because he needs to present so-called victory to his people and soldiers, mothers and veterans, so conclusive that they can be mollified in grief, or Putin must have this conflict to continue as long as he rules, according to CNN. What is your take on this analysis?
I would never make a prediction that Vladimir Putin is going to fall from power. I don't like making predictions anyway, but especially I wouldn't make that one, because he is smart. He is smart. He is ruthless. He is vicious. He took out the biggest threat to his power a couple of years ago with Mr. Prigozhin. First, remember, by making a deal with Prigozhin, allowing him to survive for a while, and then killing him. So it's going to take an awful lot for anybody to overthrow Putin, and certainly he's not going to be removed by elections. I think the way that I could see it being sold is that at the point when Russia can no longer maintain the invasion, and it possibly has to accept a settlement, I think it's presented to the people of, okay, we have liberated, part of Donetsk, we've liberated Luhansk, we've liberated Mariupol, even though they've destroyed it. And one day we will be successful beyond this. One day we will. And I think Russia will continue its hybrid warfare, something that perhaps we could talk about on another occasion, because realize that even as Russia's facing all these difficulties, these pressures, that hybrid warfare, which is economic sabotage, which is the attempt to cause explosions, not only in neighboring countries, but across Europe, that attempt to subvert countries through bribery, through misinformation, disinformation, through the finance of opposition parties and instigating protests, something that we're seeing in Moldova in what is a critical week for Moldova with its parliamentary elections. I think that continues. And indeed, I think if you're really watching carefully, what you're seeing Ukraine and Europe talking about is not only how you defend Ukraine if Putin settles, but then says, I can get more later. I think you see NATO and Ukraine talking about how do you defend the Baltic states? How do you defend Poland? How do you defend Romania from these types of threats? Because we know Putin won't quit. And at the same time, if Putin won't quit, either in terms of trying to conquer Ukraine, he's not going to quit power at home. So I think my answer here is, rather than just waiting for Putin to fall or hoping he'll fall, you just simply prepare for the idea that he will be there next year, the year after that, the year after that, and you maintain your defense accordingly.
And my last question for you, why is Vladimir Putin so reckless to conduct this hybrid war against NATO, these attacks, these violations of airspace, even though his own country is on fire right now? His oil refineries are burning on fire.
I'll preface that with another question, which I genuinely don't know the answer to, because remember that we spoke of, earlier, we talked about Putin could have had a deal with the Americans this spring. He could have had it, and he kind of threw it away by keeping and attacking Russia's Ukraine civilians. Why do that? Why? That's not, he's a smart guy. Why do that? And it's like, he thought, okay, I'm just going to break Ukraine. I'm going to break the civilian will to resist, and I'll get in even better. I'll get even more of Ukraine because of that. And so, as smart as he is, he underestimated the Ukrainian people. And he underestimated the Zelensky government as well. Well, I think the same thing's happening now on a broader scale. And that is, he's thinking, okay, look, they won't give me my deal. They won't give me the rest of Donetsk, right? They won't give me the opportunity maybe later that I can go and get Odessa, go and get Kyiv. Well, I'm just going to cause problems for them. I'm just going to test them, right? Because remember, this is a man who got away with it in the past, or almost got away with it in the past. This goes back to 2007 with the cyber attacks on the Baltic states. This goes back to 2008 with the war with Georgia. This goes back to 2014 when he seized Crimea. So he says, how much can I get away with by testing them with the drones and the fighter jets, as well as the sabotage operations, as well as the bribery? And I think he's miscalculated again, because I think he's underestimated NATO and he's underestimated the member states. I know he's underestimated Poland, because I talked to Polish TV quite a bit, and I know their responses. They're not going to stand for this. I think he's underestimated Romania, and I know he's underestimated the Baltic states. So what I think Vladimir Putin has done is he's actually energized NATO. He's actually energized NATO. He shook them out of their sleep by invading Ukraine and then expanding this. Why did he do it? If he's going to do that, he has an arrogance that he thinks he can bully the other side into submission. He thinks at the end of the day, they will submit. He cannot accept the idea that the other side will say no. So what does the other side do? It has to keep saying no.
Thank you, Professor Lukas, for your time and for your insightful answers. This was really insightful and in-depth interview. Thanks for your time, and glory to Ukraine.
Slava Ukraine.
Heroям
Thank you
слава.
so much.
Thank you very much.